My daughter-in-law sold my house while I was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from a surgery I wasn't even sure I'd survive. I didn't scream, I didn't call anyone, I just lay there, staring at the pale ceiling tiles, and smiled. Because what they didn't know was that nothing in that house actually belonged to them. What I did next would change everything. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. The room smelled like antiseptic and something faintly metallic, the kind of scent that clings to your skin no matter how many times you wash your hands. Machines hummed softly beside me, blinking in steady rhythms, as if they were more certain about my future than I was. 3 days earlier, I had been rushed into surgery after collapsing in my kitchen. The doctor said it was my heart, a warning. He called it, at 72, warnings carry a different weight. They sound less like advice and more like deadlines. No one from my family had stayed the night. My son, Daniel, had visited briefly the first day. He stood at the foot of my bed, checking his watch more often than he looked at me. His wife, Claire, didn't come at all. She had sent a text instead. Hope everything goes well, keep us posted. That was it. I told myself they were busy. People always are. But on the morning of the third day, everything changed. A nurse had just helped me sit up when my phone buzzed on the tray beside me. My hands were still weak, my fingers unsteady as I reached for it. The message wasn't from Daniel. It was from Mrs. Carter, my neighbor of 15 years. There are strangers in your house. I frowned, reading it twice. Another message came immediately after. They're walking through every room. Your daughter-in-law is showing them around. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe Claire had invited someone over, repairs, cleaning, something reasonable. But then Mrs. Carter sent a photo. It was my living room. The same beige sofa I had picked out with my husband 30 years ago. The same bookshelf, still lined with his old paperbacks. And standing in the middle of it, Claire. She was smiling, gesturing toward the fireplace like she owned the place. Behind her, a young couple nodded politely, their eyes scanning the walls as if they were already imagining new paint colors. My house, being shown like it was already gone. I felt something shift inside my chest, not pain, not fear, something colder, clearer. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text Claire. Instead, I locked my phone and set it down slowly on the tray. The nurse asked if I was all right. I nodded. I'm fine, I said. And for the first time in days, I meant it. Because if Claire thought she could sell my house while I was lying here, weak and alone, then she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The hospital room was quiet again after the nurse left, but the silence felt different now. Heavier. Not empty, just waiting. I picked up my phone once more and stared at the photo Mrs. Carter had sent. Claire stood there like she belonged in every corner of that house. Like she had already rewritten the story of it, without me. I zoomed in slowly. The dining table was still there, the one Daniel used to do his homework on when he was 10. His legs swinging because they couldn't quite reach the floor. I used to sit across from him every night, helping him with math problems I barely remembered myself. I blinked, and the image blurred. Not from tears. From distance. It felt like I was looking at someone else's life. Another message came through. There's a real estate sign in your yard. I let out a slow breath. So this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. Made without me. I leaned back against the pillows, careful not to disturb the IV in my arm. The machine beside me beeped steadily, counting something I couldn't control. Time, maybe, or patience. I thought about calling Daniel again. I pictured his voice, tight, distracted, the way he always sounded like he was halfway out the door. Even when he was standing right in front of me. And Claire. Claire would explain everything in that soft, polished tone of hers. We're just trying to help you, Mom. She always called me Mom when she needed something. Never when she didn't. I set the phone down again. No. Not yet. Across the room, the afternoon light filtered through the blinds, striping the walls in pale gold. For a moment, it reminded me of mornings in my kitchen, the way the sun used to hit the countertops just right while I made coffee. Before everything got quiet. Before Daniel stopped coming by without calling first. Before Claire started rearranging things in my home as if she were preparing it for someone else. Maybe she had been. I closed my eyes and let the memories come, not to hold on to them, but to line them up. There had been signs. Small ones. Claire asking about the deed one afternoon, Her voice casual. Just curious, she'd said, is everything under your name? Or was anything transferred after Dad passed? I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Then there were the comments about the house being too big. You don't need all that space anymore, she'd said once, standing in my living room, looking around like she was measuring it. Daniel hadn't said anything. He rarely did. That silence, it had weight now. I opened my eyes again. The ceiling looked the same as before, plain, unmoving. But something inside me had shifted into place. They thought I was weak. They thought a hospital bed meant I was out of the picture. I reached for my phone one more time, but this time, I didn't open Daniel's contact. I scrolled past his name. Past Claire's. Until I found another number. One I hadn't used in years. My thumb hovered for just a second before I pressed call. The line rang twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Margaret, it's been a long time. I lit a small smile for him. Yes, I said quietly, it has. I paused, glancing once more at the photo of my house, my past, being handed away like it meant nothing. I think it's time we talked about the trust. And just like that, the story they thought was over was only just beginning. I held the phone against my ear, listening to the quiet hum on the other end of the line. It had been years since I last spoke to him. Back when my husband, Robert, was still alive, he handled everything. The finances, the paperwork, the kind of decisions that felt too heavy for everyday conversation. I trusted him, completely. And after he passed, I trusted that what he left behind would be simple. I was wrong. Margaret, Mr. Whitaker's voice came through again. Steady, professional. You mentioned a trust? I shifted slightly in the hospital bed, wincing as a dull ache spread across my chest. Not sharp enough to alarm anyone, just enough to remind me I wasn't as strong as I used to be. There's something happening, I said, at my house. I kept my voice calm, measured. My daughter-in-law is showing it to buyers. There's a real estate sign in my yard. There was a pause on the line. A longer one than I expected. Did you authorize the sale? He asked. No. Another pause. Did you sign anything recently? Any transfer documents, power of attorney, anything of that nature? I thought back. The kitchen table, a stack of papers, Claire standing beside me, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder. It's just routine, Mom, she had said, insurance updates, nothing complicated. I had signed them. Of course I had. Because that's what you do when you trust family. I signed something, I admitted quietly, a few weeks ago. Mr. Whitaker didn't react right away. I could hear papers shuffling faintly in the background, like he was already pulling files, connecting pieces I couldn't see yet. Margaret, he said finally, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more focused, I need you to listen carefully. I closed my eyes. I'm listening. The house is not something your daughter-in-law can legally sell on her own. He continued, not unless she has authority you've explicitly granted, or unless ownership has changed. Ownership. The word landed heavier than I expected. That house, I began, my voice softer now. Robert and I bought it together. We lived there for over 30 years. Yes, he said, and after Robert passed, the property wasn't transferred in the way most people assume. I opened my eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling again. What do you mean? Another pause. But this one felt different. Like a door about to open. Your husband set up a trust, Mr. Whitaker said, a comprehensive one. It includes the house, along with several other assets. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. I remember signing something like that, I said, but he never went into details. He said it was just for security. It was, Mr. Whitaker replied, but not just for financial security. I waited. The machines beside me continued their steady rhythm. Beep, pause, beep. He structured it in a way that keeps control in your hands. He said, not your son's, not anyone else's. A slow breath left my lungs. So Claire, I started, has no authority, he finished, at least not from the trust itself. Silence filled the space between us. But it wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity. Cold, precise. What about the papers I signed? I asked. That, he said carefully, is what we need to look at next. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Across the room, the sunlight had shifted slightly. The golden lines on the wall were fading, replaced by something cooler, dimmer. Like the day was stepping back. I want copies of everything, I said, every document with my name on it. You'll have them, he replied. And Margaret? I waited. If someone is attempting to sell a property they don't legally control. He continued, they're not just overstepping. He paused. They're exposing themselves. I let that settle in. Not fear. Not anger. Just understanding. I glanced at my phone again. At the image of Claire standing in my living room, smiling for strangers. Letting them imagine a future that wasn't hers to give. They think I'm out of the picture, I said quietly. Mr. Whitaker didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because for the first time since I collapsed in that kitchen, I wasn't lying in a hospital bed anymore. Not really. I was already moving. And this time, I wasn't going to be silent. After I hung up the phone, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anger either. What I felt was something much quieter. Clarity. The kind that doesn't come all at once, but settles in slowly, like dust after something has already been broken. I leaned back against the pillow, letting my eyes rest on the ceiling again. The same ceiling I had stared at for 3 days straight, but now, it didn't feel like I was stuck here anymore. Now, I was thinking. Carefully. Piece by piece. Because when I replayed the last few months in my mind, things started to line up in a way they hadn't before. Claire hadn't just suddenly decided to sell my house. No. This had been building. I remembered a Sunday afternoon not too long ago. She had come over early, before Daniel arrived, said she wanted to help organize some of my paperwork. I was in the kitchen making tea. She was in the living room, going through drawers I hadn't opened in years. At the time, it felt helpful. Now, it felt different. I remembered how she held up an old folder. Is this still relevant? She had asked, flipping through it without really waiting for my answer. It had been labeled in Robert's handwriting. Estate documents. I had told her to leave it. She smiled. But she didn't put it back right away. That smile, it stayed with me now. Then there were the smaller things. Questions that didn't seem important at the time. Do you ever think about downsizing? What would you even do with all this space? You know, maintenance on a house like this can get expensive. She never pushed too hard. Never said anything directly. But she said enough. Enough to plant the idea. Enough to make it sound reasonable. And Daniel? He just followed her lead. He always had, in ways I didn't want to admit. I remembered the last dinner we had together before I ended up in the hospital. We sat at the same table I had shared with Robert for decades. Claire did most of the talking. Daniel barely looked up from his plate. We've been thinking, she said, her voice light, almost casual. Maybe it's time to start making things easier for you. Easier. That word again. I had nodded. Smiled. Because that's what I had learned to do over the years. Keep things calm. Keep things smooth. But now, sitting in that hospital bed, I could see it clearly. They weren't trying to make things easier for me. They were trying to make things easier for themselves. And I had let them. For longer than I should have. I reached over slowly and picked up my phone again. No new messages. No missed calls from Daniel. No concern. No questions. Just silence. The kind that says more than words ever could. I didn't feel hurt. Not anymore. That part had already passed. What I felt now was distance. The kind that makes decisions easier. I turned the phone over in my hand, then placed it back down beside me. They had already made their move. They thought it was finished. That I was too weak, too tired, too alone to do anything about it. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that assumption settle in. Then I opened them again. And this time, there was no hesitation left. If Claire thought she could rewrite my life while I was lying here, then she had just given me exactly what I needed. Time. And when you give someone like me time, you don't realize it right away. But you've already lost. The next morning, I didn't wait. Hospitals have a way of making time feel slow, but decisions don't have to be. By 8:15 a.m., I was already sitting upright in bed. My tray pushed aside, my phone in my hand. The nurse had just finished checking my vitals when I asked her for a simple favor. Could you bring me my bag? I said. She nodded, unaware that what I was asking for wasn't just a purse. It was everything I needed to start. Inside that worn leather bag were things I hadn't touched in years. Old documents, folded envelopes, a copy of Robert's handwriting that I had never thrown away. Things Claire thought were meaningless. She was wrong. I pulled out a small folder, the edges slightly bent from time. My fingers moved slower than they used to, but they were steady. I didn't rush. Because this part mattered. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Mr. Whitaker. I've located the trust documents, he said without hesitation, and I've also reviewed the standard forms that could have been used recently. I listened quietly. There's a possibility, he continued, that what you signed was a limited authorization, something that gives the appearance of control, without actually transferring ownership. Meaning? I asked. Meaning they might believe they have the right to act on your behalf. He said, but legally, that's not the same as owning anything. I nodded slowly. That sounded like Claire. Careful. Calculated. Just enough to move forward. Not enough to understand the full picture. I want to see everything, I said, every page. You will, he replied, but Margaret, there's something else. I waited. The trust your husband set up wasn't passive, he said, it has conditions, protections. My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the folder. What kind of protections? There was a brief pause. The kind that activate when someone tries to act against your interest, he said, especially regarding the property. I didn't speak right away. Because I understood. Not fully. But enough. Robert had never been careless. Not with money. Not with people. And definitely not with me. Send me what you have, I said. It's already on its way, he answered, and Margaret, I recommend we move quickly. I glanced toward the window. The sky was clear, bright, calm. A strange contrast to everything that was unfolding. I will, I said quietly. After the call ended, I placed the phone down and opened the folder in my lap. Page by page. Line by line. Names. Dates. Signatures. Some familiar. Some not. I didn't panic. I didn't rush to conclusions. I just read. Because for the first time, I wasn't relying on what anyone told me. I was looking for myself. And then, I saw it. A document dated 3 weeks ago. My name at the bottom. My signature. But something about it felt off. Not wrong enough to notice at a glance. But not right enough to ignore. The spacing. The pressure. The way the ink settled on the page. I had signed something. That much was true. But not this. I leaned back slightly, letting the realization settle in. They hadn't just assumed control. They had taken it. Or at least, tried to. And that changed everything. Because misunderstanding can be explained. Assumption can be forgiven. But this? This was different. I closed the folder carefully and placed it back into my bag. No sudden movements. No emotional reaction. Just quiet certainty. They thought they were helping themselves to my life. They thought I wouldn't notice. That I wouldn't understand. That I wouldn't fight. I looked down at my hands. Still steady. Still mine. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was catching up anymore. I felt like I was ahead. And they didn't even know it yet. By the afternoon, everything had changed. Not outside that hospital room. But inside it. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving. Mr. Whitaker called again just after noon. This time, his tone was different, more precise, like he had finished connecting the pieces. I've reviewed the document you mentioned, he said, the one with your signature. I didn't interrupt. It's not a transfer of ownership, he continued, but it's being used as if it were. I let that settle. So they're using it to act on my behalf, I said. Yes, he replied, but they've gone beyond what that document allows. How far? I asked. There was a pause. Far enough that we need to stop this immediately. I turned my head slightly, looking out the window again. The sunlight had shifted higher now, brighter, almost harsh against the glass. Then we stop it, I said. No hesitation. No doubt. I'm preparing a formal notice, he continued. It will go to the real estate agent, the buyers, and anyone involved in the transaction. It states clearly that the sale is unauthorized. And the house? I asked. Legally untouchable without your direct approval, he said, which they do not have. I nodded slowly. Good. But he wasn't finished. There's also a clause in the trust, he added, one your husband included very deliberately. I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the blanket. What kind of clause? The kind that protects you from internal exploitation, he said. If any party attempts to act against your interest, especially in regard to property, they risk losing any future claim tied to the trust. Silence. Not shock. Not even surprise. Just confirmation. Robert had seen something. Or maybe he had just understood people better than I did. They don't know about this, do they? I asked. No, Mr. Whitaker said, and based on their actions, I would say they're operating under a very different assumption. I almost smiled. They think the house is already theirs, I said quietly. Yes, he replied, they do. I let out a slow breath. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Let them. There was a brief pause on the line. Margaret? Let them continue, I repeated, for now. Because this wasn't just about stopping them. Stopping them would be easy. Too easy. This was about something else. Understanding how far they were willing to go. What they were willing to risk. What they thought they could take, without consequence. I want everything documented, I said, every showing, every conversation, every step they take. You're building a case, he said. No, I replied softly. I'm building clarity. After the call ended, I sat there in silence again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt controlled. Deliberate. Across the room, the machine continued its steady rhythm. Beep, pause, beep. Alive. Stable. Waiting. Just like me. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. I looked at his name on the screen. Didn't answer. Not yet. Because whatever he was about to say, it wasn't going to change anything. They had already made their move. Now, it was my turn to decide how this ends. I let Daniel's call ring out. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. A second later, a message appeared. Mom, call me back, it's important. I stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it and placed the phone beside me. Important. That word again. It always seemed to become important when something affected them. Not before. Not when I was lying on the kitchen floor, struggling to breathe. Not when I was wheeled into surgery alone. But now? Now that something had shifted. Now it was important. I didn't feel the need to respond. Not yet. Because I already knew what the conversation would sound like. Concern first. Then explanation. Then justification. And somewhere in between, Claire's voice, guiding the direction of it all. I leaned back slowly, adjusting the blanket over my legs. The room was quieter than before, but my mind wasn't. It was moving. Tracking. Observing. By late afternoon, another message came in. This time, it wasn't from Daniel. It was from an unknown number. Hi, this is Karen from Silverline Realty. We've been trying to reach you regarding the property at your address. I didn't read the rest right away. I didn't need to. They were already feeling it. The shift. The hesitation. The resistance. Mr. Whitaker had moved fast. Faster than Claire expected. I opened the message fully this time. We've received notice that there may be an issue with authorization. Could you please confirm your availability to discuss? There it was. Doubt. Small, but enough. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message directly to Mr. Whitaker. Let him handle it. Let the pressure build where it needed to. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. Daniel. This time, I answered. I didn't say anything right away. Neither did he. For a few seconds, there was only breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, he finally said. His voice sounded different. Not rushed. Not distracted. Careful. Yes, I replied. Another pause. I heard from Claire, he said. There's some kind of issue with the house. The realtor said something about legal complications. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. There it was. Not your house. Just the house. I see, I said. Did you talk to someone? He asked. I did. Silence again. Then. Mom, we were just trying to help. He said quickly. The house is too much for you right now. We thought if we handled things while you were in the hospital. Handled what? I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. I just asked. And that was enough to stop him. I mean, arrangements, he said, less certain now. Getting things ready, making it easier for you when you get out. Easier. That word again. I let a few seconds pass before responding. Daniel, I said, my voice steady, did I ask you to do any of that? No, but. Did I sign anything giving you permission to sell my house? He hesitated. I thought Claire handled that part. He said. Of course he did. He always thought that. I see, I said again. No anger. No accusation. Just distance. Mom, you have to understand. I understand more than you think, I said quietly. That stopped him. Completely. On the other end of the line, I could hear him exhale. Long. Uncertain. What does that mean? He asked. I opened my eyes and looked out the window. The sky had turned softer now. Evening was starting to settle in. It means, I said, that things are going to change. Another pause. What kind of change? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, he wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. You'll find out soon enough, I said. And before he could respond, I ended the call. No explanation. No argument. Just silence. Because at this point, words weren't necessary anymore. Everything that needed to be said was already in motion. That night, I didn't sleep much. Hospitals are never truly quiet. There's always something. A cart rolling down the hallway. Distant voices. The steady rhythm of machines reminding you that time is moving whether you rest or not. But it wasn't the noise that kept me awake. It was clarity. I lay there, staring into the dim light above me, replaying everything Mr. Whitaker had said. The trust, the clause, the boundaries they had already crossed without realizing it. They thought they were in control. But they were already standing on unstable ground. By early morning, I made another call. Not to Daniel. Not to Claire. To the bank. The woman on the other end spoke politely, professionally, the kind of voice that doesn't ask questions unless it has to. I'd like to review all accounts connected to my name, I said, and I need to update access permissions immediately. There was a brief pause. Of course, ma'am, can you confirm your identity? I did. Slowly, clearly. No mistakes. Because this part mattered just as much as anything else. Within minutes, she was pulling up records I hadn't looked at in years. Everything appears normal, she said at first. Look again, I replied. There was a longer pause this time. I could hear the shift in her breathing, the subtle change in tone as she moved from routine to attention. There have been recent inquiries, she admitted. Someone requested information about linked assets. Who? I asked. Another pause. They identified themselves as acting on your behalf. Of course they did. Remove all third-party access, I said, immediately. Yes, ma'am. And flag any future requests. Nothing moves without my direct confirmation. Understood. I ended the call and set the phone down. One more door closed. One more step secured. They wouldn't be able to reach into anything else now, not without hitting resistance. Not without leaving a trace. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Claire. I watched her name appear on the screen. Didn't answer. She called again. And again. 3 times in a row. I let each one go. Then finally, a message. Margaret, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. I read it once. Then again. Misunderstanding. That word didn't fit anymore. Not after what I had seen. Not after what I had confirmed. This wasn't confusion. This was intention. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the photo Mrs. Carter had sent me again. My living room. My furniture. My life. And Claire, standing in the middle of it, smiling like everything was already hers. I looked at that image for a long moment. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just recognition. Because now I could see it clearly. She hadn't just stepped into my home. She had stepped into a position she thought I had already given up. But I hadn't. I never had. I locked my phone and set it aside. Across the room, the morning light was starting to come in again. Soft, quiet, steady. Just like everything I was doing now. They were starting to feel the pressure. The calls. The legal notice. The silence. They didn't understand it yet. But they would. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. And the next time we spoke, it wouldn't be about confusion. It would be about consequences. 2 days later, I was discharged. The doctor said I needed rest. Take it slow, he told me, no stress. I nodded. But stress wasn't something that came from outside anymore. It had already happened. Now, everything was controlled. Mr. Whitaker had arranged for a car to pick me up. Not Daniel, not Claire. Someone neutral. Someone who didn't ask questions. As we pulled up to my street, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel emotional. I just looked. The house stood exactly where it always had. Same white siding, same porch Robert had repaired every spring, same front yard I used to trim myself before my knees started giving me trouble. But something was different. The sign. For sale. Bright, clean, planted right into my lawn like a flag claiming territory. I stepped out of the car slowly. No rush. No hesitation. The front door opened before I reached it. Claire. She stood there, frozen for a split second when she saw me. Then she smiled. Too quickly. Margaret, she said, stepping forward, you're home. We didn't expect you until tomorrow. Of course she didn't. I hadn't told her. I'm feeling better, I said. My voice was calm. Even. I walked past her without waiting for an invitation. Inside, everything looked almost the same. Almost. Some things were missing. A painting from the hallway. One of Robert's old chairs. Small things. But noticeable. There were papers on the dining table. Brochures. Contracts. A folder with the real estate company's logo printed across the front. Claire followed me in, her heels clicking softly against the floor. We were just organizing a few things, she said, trying to make the transition easier for you. Easier. I set my bag down gently on the table. Transition? I asked. She hesitated. Just for a second. Well, moving forward, she said, we talked about this, remember? Downsizing, finding you something more manageable. I don't remember agreeing to sell my house, I said. Still calm. Still quiet. Her smile tightened. Daniel appeared from the hallway. He looked surprised. Then uncomfortable. Mom, he said, we were going to call you. I'm here now, I replied. Silence settled over the room. Not loud, but heavy enough that no one rushed to fill it. Claire straightened slightly, shifting her tone. There's been some confusion, she said, but we've already started the process. Backing out now could be complicated. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the confidence she was trying to hold onto. At the assumption still sitting just beneath it. Complicated for who? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Daniel stepped in instead. Mom, we're just trying to do what's best for you, he said. The house is too much. The upkeep, the cost, it doesn't make sense anymore. I nodded slowly. I see. Then I reached into my bag. Pulled out the folder. Placed it gently on the table. I've been reviewing some documents, I said. Claire's eyes flicked down. Then back up to me. Careful. Watching. And I've spoken to my lawyer, I continued. That's when it changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough. The air shifted. Claire's posture stiffened. Daniel went quiet. And for the first time since I walked through that door, they weren't leading the conversation anymore. I opened the folder. Slowly. Deliberately. I think, I said, looking at both of them, it's time we all understood exactly what's happening. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because something had already cracked. Not the house. Not the deal. Their certainty. And once that's gone, everything else follows. I let the folder rest on the table for a moment before opening it. No rush. No dramatic movement. Just a quiet shift, from assumption to reality. Claire's eyes stayed on my hands. Daniel looked between us, uncertain, like he was waiting for someone else to explain what was happening. But this time, there was no one else. I opened the folder and turned it slightly so they could see. Not everything. Just enough. This, I said, tapping lightly on the top page, is the trust Robert set up before he passed. Claire didn't speak. But I saw it. That flicker. The moment something didn't line up with what she thought she knew. Daniel frowned slightly. A trust? He asked. I thought everything just transferred to you. It did, I said. Then I paused. But not in the way you think. Silence. I turned one page. Then another. Letting the sound of paper fill the space between us. Controlled. Deliberate. The house, I continued, is not something that can be sold without my direct authorization. Not assumed, not implied. Claire shifted her weight. That's what the documents were for, she said quickly. You signed them, you gave us permission to help manage things. I looked at her. Calm. Steady. I signed something, I said. Then I slid another page forward. But not this. Her eyes dropped to the document. For the first time. She didn't speak. Daniel leaned in slightly. What does that mean? he asked. It means, I said, that the authority you thought you had doesn't exist. The room went still. Claire straightened. That's not accurate, she said, her voice tightening. We've already started the process. The realtor, the listing, the buyers, this isn't something you can just undo. I nodded once. You're right, I said. That caught her off guard. Then I continued. You can't undo something that was never valid to begin with. Silence. Heavier this time. Daniel looked at me. Then at Claire. Then back at me. Mom, what are you saying? He asked. I closed the folder gently. I'm saying the sale isn't happening, I replied. Claire let out a short breath. That's not realistic, she said. There are contracts in motion. They've already been notified, I said. She stopped. Notified? She repeated. My lawyer sent formal notice. I said, the sale is unauthorized. Any further action moves into legal territory. That's when it hit. Not fully. But enough. Claire's composure slipped, just slightly. You went behind our backs? She said. I almost smiled. No, I said quietly. I went around you. Daniel stepped back a little, running a hand through his hair. This is getting out of hand, he muttered. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Is it? I asked. He didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't have control of the situation. Claire tried again. A different tone this time. Softer. Careful. Margaret, we were only trying to help you. She said, you've been struggling. The house is too much. We thought this would be easier for everyone. I let her finish. Didn't interrupt. Then I said the only thing that mattered. You weren't helping me, I said. You were helping yourselves. That landed. Clean. Direct. No emotion. No accusation. Just truth. Claire didn't respond. Daniel didn't move. And in that silence, everything shifted. Because they could argue about intentions. They could argue about decisions. But they couldn't argue with one thing anymore. They had no control. And they were just starting to realize it. No one spoke for a long moment after that. Not Claire. Not Daniel. Even the house felt different, like it was listening. Claire was the first to move. She crossed her arms, a small gesture, but it changed everything. Less polished now, less controlled. More defensive. You're overreacting, she said finally. This doesn't have to turn into something bigger than it is. I didn't respond right away. Because I wanted her to keep talking. We made a decision, she continued. Maybe we should have discussed it more. But the intention was good. You can't punish us for trying to help. Punish. That word lingered in the air. I looked at her carefully. I'm not punishing you, I said. Then I opened the folder again. Slowly. Deliberately. There's something you should understand, I continued. Daniel shifted slightly beside her, his attention fixed on the papers now. What is it? He asked. I turned the document toward them. Not all of it. Just one section. A paragraph Robert had insisted on including. The trust isn't just about holding assets, I said, it's about protecting them. Claire leaned forward slightly, reading. At first, her expression didn't change. Then it did. Just a little. Enough. What is this? She asked. You tell me, I said. She read it again. Slower this time. Daniel stepped closer, trying to follow along. What does it say? He asked. Claire didn't answer. So I did. It says that any attempt to act against my direct interest, especially involving the sale or transfer of property, triggers a review. I paused. Let that settle. And if that action is determined to be intentional? Daniel frowned. Then the individuals involved can be removed from any future benefit connected to the trust. Silence. Complete. Daniel looked at me. Then at Claire. What does that mean? He asked. His voice was quieter now. Less certain. It means, I said, that if you continue down this path, you lose everything Robert set aside for you. That was it. That was the moment. Claire stepped back. Just slightly. But it was enough. That's not, she started, then stopped. Because she didn't have an answer ready. Daniel's face changed. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. Realization. You're saying, we could lose everything? He asked. I'm saying, I replied, that you've already taken steps that put you at risk. Claire shook her head quickly. No, that's not how this works. We didn't do anything wrong. We were acting on your behalf. You were acting without my permission, I said. Still calm. Still steady. And now, I added, everything you've done is being reviewed. Daniel took a step back. Ran his hand through his hair again. This is insane, he muttered. We were just trying to help. Why would Dad set something up like this? I looked at him. Because that answer mattered. Because he understood something I didn't. I said. Daniel met my eyes. What? I held his gaze for a second longer before answering. That good intentions don't always stay good when money is involved. That landed harder than anything else I had said. Claire didn't speak. Daniel didn't argue. Because now, they weren't defending their actions anymore. They were thinking about consequences. Real ones. Not abstract. Not emotional. Legal. Final. I closed the folder once more. Gently. There's still time, I said. Both of them looked at me. Not with confidence. Not with control. But with something new. Uncertainty. What do you mean? Daniel asked. I stood there, steady, unshaken. It means, I said, that what happens next depends on what you do now. And for the first time since I walked back into that house. They understood. This wasn't a disagreement. It was a line. And they were already standing on the wrong side of it. No one said anything after that. Not right away. The house stood still around us, holding years of memories in its walls, birthdays, quiet dinners, long winters, and the kind of silence that used to feel peaceful, not like this. Daniel looked at the floor. Claire didn't meet my eyes. For the first time since all of this began, they weren't trying to explain anything. They were thinking. Carefully. You should call the realtor, I said finally. My voice wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. Tell them the listing is withdrawn. Immediately. Claire hesitated. Then she looked at Daniel. Not leading anymore. Waiting. Daniel swallowed, then nodded slowly. I'll take care of it, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't thank him. Because this wasn't something he was doing for me. This was something he was doing to stop things from getting worse. Claire picked up her phone a few seconds later. Her movements were slower now, less certain. She stepped into the other room, her voice low as she made the call. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I already knew how it would end. A few days later, the sign was gone. Just like that. No announcement. No explanation. Just removed. The yard looked the same as before. Quiet, undisturbed, like nothing had happened. But something had. Inside the house, things were different too. Not dramatically. But enough. Claire didn't move through the rooms the same way anymore. She didn't touch things without asking. Didn't rearrange, didn't suggest. And Daniel? He came by more often. Not to fix anything. Not to manage anything. Just to sit. We didn't talk much. But that was fine. Some things don't need to be said out loud. A week later, I called Mr. Whitaker again. I'm ready, I told him. For what? He asked. To make a few changes. There was a pause. Then he understood. We reviewed everything together. The trust. The conditions. The names. And then, I made my decisions. Calmly. Clearly. No emotion guiding it. Just clarity. Because this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about boundaries. And once those are crossed, you don't just forget. When everything was finalized, I stood in my living room again. The same room Claire had shown to strangers. The same room where my life had almost been handed away. But now, it felt different. Not because the house had changed, but because I had. I walked over to the window and looked out at the yard. No sign. No strangers. Just quiet. The kind I remembered. Behind me, I heard Daniel's voice. Mom? I turned. He was standing there, unsure of what to say. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Then it passed. Yes, I said. He hesitated. Then. I'm sorry. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Then I nodded once. I know, I said. And that was enough. Not forgiveness. Not fully. But something closer to understanding. I turned back to the window. The sunlight stretched across the floor, warm and steady. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. More to myself than to him. And for the first time since this all began. That felt true. Because they thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. They thought they could decide when my story ended. But they were wrong. I didn't need to fight loudly. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to stand still. And remind them. This was never their house. It was mine.